Hold on. Here we go. Oh, my God. Ow. We're going to the powder bars.
I was just getting in my pickup to come to town, and the CB was on, and a guy said, yeah, there's a hell of a wreck in there. That guy in that Bronco don't look like he's doing very good. A Bronco? Oh, no. You know, and that's my memory. That's the last one. And he left, and Gabe was gone.
He's going to shut me down for pulling logs. They're trying to shut me down anyway. He said I was pulling natural resources, but I pull up natural, salvage natural.
The swamp has a way of keeping secrets. Thick fog rolling over dark water, cypress knees rising like ghosts from the mud. And somewhere in the silence, the echo of a man's voice shouting, "Here we go." For years, that voice belonged to one unforgettable figure, Shelby Stanga, the wild-hearted logger who became one of the most recognizable faces on Axe Men. But behind the laughter, behind the fearless dives into murky waters, and behind the legend of the Swamp Man, lies a story far more complicated and far more heartbreaking. Viewers first met Shelby as a larger-than-life character on the History Channel. He wasn't polished, he wasn't scripted in the traditional sense. He didn't act like a reality TV star chasing fame. Instead, he appeared exactly as he was: muddy boots, wild grin, unpredictable energy, and a deep love for the Louisiana bayou. What made Shelby stand out wasn't just his job. It was how he did it. While other logging crews felled towering trees in dense forests, Shelby searched for something different. Ancient sinker logs buried beneath swamp waters for decades, sometimes centuries. These weren't ordinary pieces of timber. Some had been submerged so long they absorbed minerals from the mud, transforming into stunning shades of blue, red, purple, and green. To Shelby, they weren't just logs. They were buried treasure. But treasure hunting in the swamp isn't glamorous. It meant strapping more than 100 pounds of weight to his body so he could sink to the river bottom. It meant walking blindly in pitch-black water where visibility was zero. It meant feeling through thick mud with his boots, hoping to strike wood instead of a snake, or worse. Every dive carried risk. His air supply could tangle. Branches could trap him. Wildlife could attack. And sometimes it did. Shelby often joked about snake bites and snapping turtles, but the scars were real. The danger wasn't exaggerated for television. He truly worked in one of the most hazardous environments imaginable. When he said he drowned 3 times a load, it wasn't just colorful storytelling. It was a reflection of how close he came to disaster on a regular basis. Yet despite the danger, fans loved him. They tuned in not only for the logging competition, but for Shelby's wild energy. He fired guns into the air in celebration. He wrestled stubborn logs from the water like a man battling sea monsters. He cracked jokes mid-crisis. Even critics who doubted some of his tall tales couldn't deny his magnetism. But fame has a way of complicating even the simplest life. Before television, Shelby was just a swamp logger trying to make a living. He started young, barely a teenager when he began working outdoors. Raised primarily by his mother, he learned independence early. The swamp wasn't a backdrop for a show back then, it was survival. If he didn't haul logs, he didn't get paid. Television changed that. As Axe Men gained popularity, Shelby became one of its breakout personalities. Spin-offs followed. His nickname, the Swamp Man, became part of pop culture. His fan base grew far beyond Louisiana. Suddenly, a man who preferred hammocks and boat launches found himself recognized in grocery stores. But behind the scenes, not everything was smooth. Reports surfaced of contract disputes. Rumors suggested disagreements over compensation. Shelby eventually stepped away from the show, shocking fans who believed he was its heart. At first, speculation swirled. Was it health issues, creative differences, personal struggles? The truth, as later hinted, involved dissatisfaction with how things were handled financially. For a man who valued fairness and hard work, feeling underappreciated cut deep. And then came something far more painful, the rumors of his death. Online headlines began spreading alarming claims. Some said he died during filming. Others blamed swamp accidents or wildlife encounters. Given the show's history with tragic losses among other cast members, fans feared the worst. Social media exploded with concern. Imagine being alive and reading your own obituary. Shelby was forced to publicly address the situation, reassuring everyone that he had indeed been in an accident, but he was very much alive. The emotional toll of that moment was heavy. It revealed just how fragile reality television fame can be. One rumor, one viral post, and suddenly your life becomes a headline. But the heartbreak surrounding Shelby wasn't limited to false reports. X-Men itself carried a shadow. Over the years, the show experienced real tragedies. Cast members passed away in accidents and from illness. Helicopter crashes, vehicle collisions, health battles. Each loss reminded viewers that logging, whether in forests or swamps, is one of the most dangerous professions in America. Critics began questioning whether the show glamorized that danger. Environmental groups argued the series painted logging in an irresponsible light. Industry professionals claimed it exaggerated recklessness for ratings. The tension between entertainment and reality grew stronger with each season. Shelby, intentionally or not, became a symbol within that debate. To fans, he represented authenticity. To critics, he sometimes embodied the chaotic image they believed the show projected. The line between performance and real life blurred. And then there were legal troubles. In 2014, Shelby faced arrest over a tree-cutting incident involving disputed property. Authorities charged him with felony theft after he allegedly cut a cypress tree that was considered protected. He spent a short time in jail before release. He never fully addressed the incident publicly. For supporters, it was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. For skeptics, it added fuel to the idea that his lifestyle crossed boundaries. Either way, it marked another painful chapter in his public journey. Through it all, one thing remained consistent: his devotion to the swamp. While many reality stars chase luxury after finding fame, Shelby didn't relocate to Hollywood. He didn't trade boats for sports cars. He stayed in Louisiana. He continued diving for logs, continued fixing engines, continued living the same rugged lifestyle he always had. In interviews, he made it clear, money was never the point. He was happiest knee-deep in mud, chasing the next submerged log. It was home. But even home can carry weight. Years of physically brutal labor take a toll. Diving in cold, murky water day after day strains the body. Lifting ancient timber stresses joints and muscles. Injuries accumulate. Recovery slows with age. For someone whose identity is built on physical endurance, that reality can be heartbreaking. The cameras may capture laughter, but they don't always show exhaustion. They don't show the quiet nights after filming wraps, the uncertainty when contracts end. The pressure of maintaining a public persona while simply trying to earn a living. Shelby's tragedy isn't defined by a single catastrophic event. It's layered. It's the burden of being misunderstood, the sting of public rumors, the grief of losing fellow cast members, the strain of legal controversy, the physical wear of decades spent battling nature. And perhaps most of all, the realization that reality television eventually moves on. Shows get canceled, networks shift focus, new personalities emerge, but the people behind the footage must return to real life. When X-Men concluded, the spotlight dimmed. For some cast members, that meant stepping into other ventures. For Shelby, it meant going back to the swamp, not as a television star, but as a logger once more. Fans still ask, will he return to TV? There's no confirmed revival, no official comeback announced. Shelby was never built for polished studio sets. He belonged where the water is dark and the cypress trees stretch toward the sky. Still, the heartbreak lingers. Because when you watch old episodes, you see more than entertainment. You see a man fully alive in his element, fearless, funny, fiercely independent. And you wonder what it cost him. When the cameras stopped rolling and the network shifted its focus, something changed. Not just for the audience, but for Shelby Stanga himself. For years, life had been divided into two worlds. There was the swamp, raw, unpredictable, dangerous. And then there was television, producers, contracts, schedules, expectations. While Shelby often appeared untouched by the fame surrounding Axemen, the truth is that no one walks through that level of exposure without feeling its weight. When the show ended, the silence was loud. No more film crews waiting at sunrise. No more dramatic narration. No more weekly broadcasts turning his everyday labor into national entertainment. For some reality stars, that silence feels like relief. For others, it feels like loss. Shelby never publicly framed it as heartbreak. That wasn't his style. But those close to the industry understand something important. When a show like Axemen fades away, it doesn't just end a job, it ends a chapter of identity. For nearly a decade, Shelby wasn't just a logger. He was the Swamp Man. He was a character audiences expected to perform, to entertain, to deliver unforgettable moments. Even if much of his personality was authentic, the presence of cameras inevitably magnifies behavior. The pressure to be on never fully disappears. And when it does disappear, there's an adjustment. Axemen had already been surrounded by tragedy before its conclusion. Several cast members from different crews lost their lives over the years, some in accidents, others due to illness. Each loss shook the community deeply. Logging is inherently dangerous, but when those dangers are documented for television, the impact feels even heavier. For Shelby, who shared screen time and rivalry with these men, the grief wasn't theoretical. It was personal. The helicopter crashes, the highway accidents, the sudden health battles. These weren't just headlines to him. They were people he knew. Critics often focused on whether the show sensationalized danger. Environmental groups questioned the portrayal of logging practices. Industry experts debated whether the series exaggerated recklessness for ratings. But for the men who lived it, the risks were real long before television arrived. Shelby had always known the swamp could take a life in seconds. He'd wrestled snapping turtles. He'd surfaced from underwater dives gasping for air. He'd navigated equipment malfunctions in deep, isolated waters. Every scar carried memory. As years passed, the physical cost of that lifestyle became harder to ignore. Underwater logging isn't kind to the body. Walking along unseen river bottoms strains ankles and knees. Lifting heavy timber punishes shoulders and back. Cold water exposure affects circulation. Breathing through equipment in muddy conditions taxes the lungs. The show captured the adrenaline. It didn't always capture the aftermath. There's something quietly heartbreaking about watching old episodes and realizing how much younger everyone looked. Stronger, faster, invincible. Time doesn't pause for television. After Axemen concluded, Shelby returned fully to the swamp. No dramatic soundtrack, no editing, just the daily grind. Some fans assumed that without TV money, life must have become harder. Others believed he had earned enough to retire comfortably. The reality sits somewhere in between. Reports have estimated his net worth in the millions during his peak fame, but Shelby never adopted a flashy lifestyle. He didn't buy luxury homes in distant cities. He didn't trade swamp boats for yachts. His most valuable possessions were often tools of his trade. He once joked that his iPhone might be his fanciest item. That simplicity wasn't an act. It was consistency. Fame hadn't reshaped his priorities. If anything, it reinforced them. But there was still emotional fallout. The false death rumors had been one of the most disturbing chapters. Imagine waking up to messages from fans grieving you while you're very much alive. That experience alone can change how someone views public life. It forces a realization. Your identity no longer belongs solely to you. It belongs to headlines, speculation, and strangers who think they know your story. For a fiercely independent man like Shelby, that loss of narrative control was painful. Then there was the 2014 arrest over the cypress tree dispute. Though he spent only a short time in custody before release, the charge of felony theft made national news. For supporters, it felt like a misunderstanding amplified by his fame. For critics, it was confirmation of their doubts. Shelby chose silence. He didn't launch public defenses. He didn't wage media campaigns. He returned to work. That decision, to let time speak instead of headlines, reflects something fundamental about him. He has always preferred action over explanation. Yet silence can be misunderstood. The logging industry itself faced increasing scrutiny during and after Axemen's run. Environmental advocates criticized the portrayal of cutting and resource extraction. Some viewers questioned whether the series blurred the line between documentation and dramatization. Others wondered if the competitive pressure encouraged risky behavior. Shelby stood in the center of that storm without ever asking to. He became a symbol of swamp logging, both admired and criticized. That's a heavy role for someone who simply started hauling logs as a teenager trying to earn money. But perhaps the most touching aspect of Shelby's story lies not in controversy, but in loyalty. Throughout it all, he remained rooted in Louisiana. He stayed near the waters he grew up around. He maintained a relatively private family life, rarely bringing loved ones into the public spotlight. In an era where reality fame often turns families into content, Shelby drew a boundary. That choice speaks volumes. The swamp shaped him. It also shielded him. While fans speculated about comebacks and spin-offs, Shelby focused on routine. Early mornings, equipment checks, the familiar smell of wet wood and river mud. He continued diving for sinker logs, not because a producer needed footage, but because he genuinely loved the hunt. There's something poetic about that. A man who briefly became a national television personality, ultimately returning to the same murky waters where his journey began. But make no mistake, the heartbreak remains layered. It's in the friends he lost. It's in the rumors he had to correct. It's in the injuries he carries quietly. It's in the reality that shows end, but consequences linger. Even now, old episodes of Axemen continue to stream. New viewers discover Shelby's laughter for the first time. They see him fire up machinery, dive fearlessly, shout triumphantly when a massive log breaks free from the mud. They see legend. What they don't always see is the toll of maintaining that legend. Aging in a profession built on physical strength is difficult. Aging in the public eye is even harder. Every rewatch freezes a version of you that no longer exists. The man on screen remains forever energetic, forever reckless, forever charging into the swamp without hesitation. Real life, however, slows down. So where does that leave Shelby Stanga today? Not vanished, not defeated, not broken, but changed. He remains active, occasionally sharing glimpses of life on social platforms. He still jokes, still ventures into the wild, still embodies the spirit fans fell in love with. Yet the intensity of national spotlight has dimmed, perhaps by choice, and maybe that's the quiet resolution to his story. The heartbreaking tragedy of Shelby Stanga isn't a dramatic final chapter. It's not a single catastrophic moment. It's the cumulative weight of danger, fame, rumor, controversy, and time. It's the cost of living fully in one of America's most unforgiving environments while millions watched. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest testament to his resilience is this. After everything, the injuries, the headlines, the losses, the speculation, he's still in the swamp, still searching, still surviving, still shouting into the fog.